The role of the father is also the protector of the child's dignity, and this requires not only manly strength, but also self-restraint. Not all fathers are biological fathers. Fathers are the ones who enhance the lives of the next generation, who serve with service and sacrifice, love and wisdom. And when they fail, as we all do, reform and redress. I realize that my lack of experience shadows my comments, so take them as thoughts from an interested friend. Just as the father of our country warned against hyper-partisanism and advocated putting lawful use of power above self-interest, let those of us who are fathers remember that our children need us to be restrained in our use of force, but unrestrained in our love. Today, we want to celebrate fathers and everybody who acts like a father and everybody who could have acted like a father. So we just want to say that Happy Father's Day. You know, I think it's a very complex job being a father. It's one of those things that I thought was too complex for me, so I've never done it. But I had one. As a matter of fact, I had a very good father. My father was a lot of the things that an American male would like to be. He was a World War II pilot. He took the GI Bill and went to college. Learned how to make money, learned how to go bankrupt, learned how to come back, had 3 kids, died feeling successful. Pretty wonderful. One of the most important things my father did for me, I think you could say, may not the most important, but one of the easiest to reminisce about was my father in the time when he was losing all the money, had just built a house in Sanford, one he had designed and then built. He had 3 kids, and since he had no money, he was doing a pretty good job of kiting checks, which was sending money from one bank to pay for things that was, if you all have never tried this, it's really fun. And his father, who was a self-made lawyer, self-taught lawyer, told him when he finally went to his father said, I don't know how you're going to fix this, but you got to stop doing what's illegal right now. And he did. And he clawed his way back into being successful. But when I was having a really terrible time in my life, very sad and depressed about my behavior, my beingness, my everything, my success, my growing up, he wrote this handwritten letter. And since he was trained as an engineer, he wrote it in those block letters of the engineer. He couldn't spell at all. But he wrote it on legal pad, a couple of pages, describing just what I told you. And it was his way of saying, don't worry. You know, I too have been less than perfect. I too know what it's like to feel like a loser. I too can empathize with your position in more ways than you might have ever thought. And so it's a real kindness of a man living 3,000 miles away from me, wrote in his own hand a letter to encourage me in a way that our conversations had never gone to. So that was my father. Earlier this week, someone sent me this statistics that about 25% of children are abused in this country, either emotionally, if you add emotionally, about 35%. 35%, that'd be a third. So if you're in a row with 3 people, think of that. That's quite unhealthy. In some ways, I think of the fact that we have some very strange images of what it is to be a man, because we have had Hollywood help tell us, and we've also had some legacy emotional damage to men who have been at war. We haven't had a generation without a war, so there's always been some men who've returned from war with the scars of that. I think also, if I'm not going to be called an idiot, which I could be, I also think that since men carry more testosterone than women, they have a tendency to anger faster. Not really sure. My mother could do it pretty fast, but and because we're bigger and more used to engaging the world in a physical way, most of our sports in this country have a degree of violence involved into them. We call them fouls, or we call them, or a good hit, depending on the sport. There's a tendency for us to respond in an aggressive manner when confronted, or when we are refused, or when we're frustrated, or whatever. It's not a quality that should be brought toward small children, but it is a quality that we seem to demonstrate. And I notice that one of the things that many women think, I believe I'm speaking correctly, that many women believe that men have it so much better than they do. And in so many ways, that's actually correct. But you know, there is a phrase which I have found to be true myself, that if you're not the lead dog, the view never changes. And so, there can be a lot of frustration in being a man, because we have high expectations of what we should be like, how we should succeed, how we should dominate the workforce. But most of us are just in with the mix. And so I'm not making excuses, but I am saying there must be some reason why our children are so often abused. And I don't have an answer for it. And I know, so just given that there's a lot of us in this room, some of us have a story of feeling, a history with their fathers that they find painful. And I was said earlier this week, I was not going to do what I usually do, which is to do a forgiveness thing around fathers, and now I've already started. So let me change the subject briefly, and I'll come back to it. Yesterday, in this country, there were two major celebrations. One was in Washington, D.C. It was a military demonstration, and it was predominantly this group. And then around the country, there were about 5 million people demonstrating, and they're mostly that group. What was beautiful about this, in my opinion, it was done peacefully. And at some of this group were saying the Pledge of Allegiance and singing God Bless America, and some in this group were quiet about what was happening over here. And there was a sense that the country has gotten big enough to be both groups. And there was, in my state of examining the political situation, we finally, in that day, became America again, because we were everybody. We're both this side and that side, and nobody had to be killed to prove that they were right. I want to read you something from our founding father, George Washington. Now, George Washington, as you know, was the head of the First Army, which we were celebrating in the Army. We were celebrating in Washington, D.C. And he was, after that, he was elected president. And in between, he led the group that wrote the Constitution. And so I think quite rightly he's been called the father of the country. And upon the completion of his second term as president, he could have, since there was no precedent before, He could have gone on for another 4 years if he wanted to. I'm sure the populace was behind him, although what he writes about in this letter to the country, part of why he was so tired with the whole process is that it had become so acrimonious that he thought the country might fall apart based on these factions. And so it didn't even require the internet for that to happen. There wasn't even MSNBC or Fox News at the time, but they had found to be a way to have their own particular passions brought to the fore, and he was afraid that the passions of people would ultimately drive the country apart. And so he writes this letter, which is, not possible to skim. Do you know what I mean? If you, good golly, the language. I'll let you hear it. And I'm just going to, because of time, I'm just going to cut to the chase here. Something that I found to be an interesting twist, which is that he says this, the disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruin of public liberty. And I believe, so there's been a lot of talk about that. And one of the things I'd just like to say is that the soul of this country is pretty darn uncomfortable with that. And I believe the problem, in my opinion, is that we have failed to be completely respectful of people as they are with their own predispositions, and that nothing in this present moment does not have a precedent before it. And so I was very happy, and it's part of the reason I'm wearing red, white, and blue, really happy to see this country could do two things at the same time. We really could have two opposing ideas competing for people's attention and not bring ourselves to violence. And there had been some doubt in my mind about that. Which brings us back to fatherhood. One of the things about, about fatherhood is this tendency to despotism of the father. And I believe that is the problem why children have so much abuse. Is that the family is not really a democratic situation, and children don't have equal votes until they really should have it, in my opinion. And once again, I'm speaking as someone who doesn't have children, but I'm pretty sure my dog doesn't get equal vote. And by extrapolation, when a parent fails to do what this delivery room doctor said to do. There's a man who writes in his blog, he was very nervous about having children. Very nervous because he didn't know if he was adequate to be a father. And so he's at the delivery room and he's handed the baby, and his eyes look like deer eyes in a headlight. And the doctor looks at him and says, "Don't worry. Keep him warm, keep him dry, keep him fed, and keep him loved, and everything will be okay." And I believe that all of us in our hearts wish that we were treated that way, or we treat others that way. But for whatever reason, we don't always. And so one of the things that I find that has happened in thinking about fathers, we tend to condemn them in some way and hold a grudge. Not every father. I was just talking about my own father who was so good to me. But I was listening to two men, Tyler Perry, who is in the entertainment business, and Wayne Dyer. Both had fathers that abused or left or something, and they carried enormous anger. And they both told the same story. The story was that they really hated their father. Tyler Perry tells us that he wrote a play talking about this, and ultimately about forgiveness toward his own father, and he put this play on repeatedly. Anytime anyone asked him to do it, he would put it on, but it never filled. He would have at the most like 30 people in there. He'd have to spend all his money putting the play on, and then nobody would come, and so he'd lose money and have to go back to work, and then someone would say, hey, why don't you put on the play? He would put on the play, but never filled. He's extremely successful today. And Wayne Dyer said much the same thing. He finally found his father's grave, and he went there to do something on it, and stood there for 2 hours in his anger and his frustration with his father, and then went to his car, and someone said, go back. And so in the next hour, he stood over the grave, and instead of doing what he came to do, he forgave his father. Now, Wayne Dyer had not been able to, he was overweight, he was alcoholic, his writing wasn't working. He was pretty much a failure at that moment. And when he did the forgiveness, he stopped drinking, he started running, and his books took off like crazy. The same thing happened to Tyler Perry. When he actually did what his play was about, the place filled, and he could not supply enough seats for all the people who wanted to be there. If you don't think this is a one world, one spirit, one connection, one power, one presence, one, if you think you can hold a grudge and get by with it, you are mistaken, according to these two gentlemen. Hold a grudge and you will be the loser. And so I said I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do a forgiveness thing, so I'm going to do something different. But you're going to have to go with me because it may not feel comfortable, okay? And I wrote my conclusion. And of course, I can't find it. Because I never write anything for this. But let me read what it looks like when I do write. It seems to me that the question of how to be a father is summed up well, but not completely, by the words of the delivery doctor: provide for their needs and love them. But in light of the prevalence of abuse, let us remember the role of the father is also the protector of the child's dignity. And this requires not only manly strength, but also self-restraint. Not all fathers are biological fathers. Fathers are the ones who enhance the lives of the next generation, who with service and sacrifice, love and wisdom. And when they fail, as we all do, reform and redress. I realize that my lack of experience shadows my comments, so take them as thoughts from an interested friend. Just as the father of our country warned against hyper-partisanism and advocated putting lawful use of power above self-interest, let those of us who are fathers remember that our children need us to be restrained in our use of force, but unrestrained in our love, willing to stand down when necessary to preserve the future generation without surrendering our responsibility to guide and lead. And so I really hope that you will understand that if we are to make a better world, we cannot carry the pain of the past into the present without a cost. And for those of us who haven't the pain that some of us do, and those who are carrying this pain, I'm going to recommend we do a meditation called Tonglen, which we haven't done here in a long time. Tonglen, T-O-N-G-L-I-N, is a Buddhist meditation which basically says, counter to what most people would like to hear, breathe in suffering and breathe out love. So you embrace the pain by breathing it into your heart and command your heart to convert it into love, and then you breathe out love. And when you breathe out love, you don't have to direct it anywhere. You can just breathe out love, or you can send it somewhere it feels like it's necessary. But this practice does two things. One is it absorbs the suffering of the world and returns love from it. But it also takes that difficult aspect of ourselves, that one that says, I should never be hurt, I have my preferences and they must be met, I am the one that's important here, and it diminishes that because its job has now gone from being satisfied to satisfying. And you become the parent of the world you live in. Like the parent you wished you had done. Breathe in suffering. Breathe in the frustration. Breathe in the anger, the loss, the sensitive sense of being disrespected. Breathe that in and breathe out love. Now, I pitched it. Now, here is the disclaimer. Don't breathe in the whole world's suffering. Take a sip of the suffering that's out there. Take a sip and no more, because it's one breath in and one breath out. And you want the breath in to contain no more than your heart can convert. And if your heart's not practiced at this, it ain't a lot. So just breathe in a little bit and then breathe out love. Are y'all with me? This is Tonglen meditation. You can do it anytime. And it is designed by the Buddhists to get rid of the ego, but I also believe it's designed to make you the person you thought you wanted your parents to be. Let's begin. And so, breathe in and breathe out into the heart. First, we'll start by breathing in love and breathing out love. Just simple. We won't do this long. The first round should be very light for each person who hasn't practiced this. Breathe in love, breathe out love. Open the heart, breathe in love, and breathe out love. Breathe in love, breathe out love. Now the heart is open. Breathe in a little bit of suffering. It could be yours or someone else's. It could be something of the world, or it could be somebody close. Breathe in just a little bit of suffering and breathe out love, asking your heart to do the conversion, the energetic conversion. Breathe in a little suffering, breathe out love. One world of suffering, one world of love. Breathe in a little suffering and breathe out love. Breathe in suffering, breathe out love. If you've taken in too much suffering and cannot convert all of it in one breath, then go back and take another breath of breathing in love and breathe out love. This is to strengthen your heart, not overwhelm it. And having done a little bit of Tonglen, let's once again go back to breathing in love and breathe out love. Cleaning up whatever's residual that is in the heart. so it is. I consider you a blessing to the world. And if you wish to continue doing this practice over time, perhaps your suffering would lessen. Perhaps the world will be a kinder, gentler place. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.